Is there a doctor in the house?
Doctor, you have a visitor in the main lobby.
Hello and welcome to the Talk to the Doc podcast, where we tackle the myth that employee engagement, it can all just be fixed with a pizza party, a survey, or, maybe just, bring your whole self to work poster in the break room. I'm your host, Steve the Dr. Meek, and hey, the doctor is in. Our guest today is Ana Welsh with Ana Welsh Leadership. Let's get into it. Ana, welcome.
Thank you so much for having me.
Well, having you on today, I'd love to hear a little bit more about, or I'm sure our audience would love to hear a little bit more about you and what you do. So can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Absolutely. Thank you again. And thank you to the audience members, listeners, and community for joining in today. My name is Ana Welsh. I am a Wharton lecturer. I teach sophomores a required leadership class called Business Communication for Impact. And I also have my own business where I do keynote speaking engagements, workshop facilitation, training, and coaching. I particularly focus on workplace dynamics and young professionals. So Gen Z, early millennials, early to mid-career professionals, especially during their inflection periods of their careers, and then the senior leaders that manage them. I focus a lot on soft skills and really how are people experiencing working with you, especially now more than ever, because I firmly believe the future of work is going to be deeply human with an AI tool belt. And I'm here to help share and translate the ambiguity behind the unwritten rules of expectations at work to those that don't have the amount of experience that you and I have, Steve.
That's awesome. It's a much needed area. Just being in IT for so long, I keep getting older, and it feels like the peers that I work with keep getting younger. So always being mindful of the differences, cultural, age, whatever they are. I used to have a service manager who would joke that if I call this person, they never answer, but if I text them, I get an instant response of, hey, what's up?
It's very true. I have to admit, I don't listen to my voicemails, and I've now made my voicemail recording asking them to email or text me. So it really is a generational thing.
That's funny. Well, let's go ahead get into it. I wanted to chat today a little bit about our topic. But first, I kind of wanted to get a sense from you. I'm a big numbers guy. I'm all about the metrics. So I'd like to get a sense of the pulse. What do you feel like kind of the current state of the market is, or what industry trends are affecting you and your business and industry?
Sure. There is a growing number of Gen Z employees entering the workforce. There is a growing mandate to utilize AI within workplaces for efficiency. However, I believe that the future of work is all about the human dynamics, the workplace dynamics, and soft skills. In fact, from now by 2030, and I'm sure your community will agree with me on this, the entire fabric of our world is going to change in terms of how we interact with one another and our dynamics. In fact, Deloitte put out a huge study that said by 2030, 2 out of 3 jobs are going to be soft skills intensive jobs. And those 2 out of 3 soft skills intensive jobs are going to grow 2.5 times faster than technical jobs.
Wow.
So right now, with Gen Z entering the workforce and continuing to increase the percentage of the population that are in the workforce while being the first digitally native population and demographic, and having 2+ years of social regression, there is a lot of rift within the growing markets of the integration of all the generations. And there's going to be a real need to translate the ambiguity around the unwritten expectations and really how to show up and stand out.
So for a leader, with those unwritten expectations, how do they figure out how to bridge that gap and communicate better, be better themselves to engage with everybody in their organization?
Great question. Time, empathy, and patience, which many of us do not have time. We are in the deficit of time, and our to-do list continues to grow. Empathy is a difficult behavior, particularly for senior leaders. I hear the following soundbite so many times. Well, when I was their age, well, growing up, this is how I did it. Well, reality is we have to push through that mentality because they didn't grow up the way that you grew up. I've been working since I was 14. I was somewhat forced to really learn human dynamics and integrate and talk to anyone at a very young age. I didn't have this brick in front of my face to digitally communicate. Same to you. However, our younger generation did not have that experience. So you're not comparing apples to apples. And so having empathy and taking a step back to understand their life experience is not comparable or the same to yours. And then patience. The prefrontal cortex in our brain is not fully developed until we're 25 years old. So that post grad or that intern, they are not thinking or wired at the same level that we are too. So really breaking down what we assume they, I'm using air quotes for the listeners, should know, and breaking that down into actual behaviors. Gen Z is craving that. They're bright-eyed and bushy-tailed, the individuals that I interact with. I've spoken at dozens of high schools and colleges and just did 9 indispensable intern programs this past June 2026. They have so many questions. There's so much ambiguity. They need someone to handhold and guide them, to teach them how to play the game, for lack of better words, at work.
So for the typical small business leader, city manager, whatever, what should they be doing within their organization? Typically you've got a leader, they're stretched thin, they don't want to create some new big HR program. What do they do to help out on both sides? Help the younger generation learn or acquire some of those skills, and help the older generation have the 3 skills that you referenced.
So speaking of the 3 skills, and I'll answer your question momentarily, another big data point that I have pulled out through researching the National Association of Colleges and Employers, they have conducted the same survey from 2019 to 2025. And it asks employers who hire postgrads, what are the skill sets that you're seeking from 20-year-olds? And where are the proficiency gaps in these skill sets? And I synthesized these 6 years of surveys and identified that the biggest proficiency skill gaps are communication, critical thinking, and professionalism. So again, there's so much that we assume, that we hope, that we think they should already know, that they frankly do not. So the more that senior leaders can spell out expectations, spell out behaviors, share sound bites, share scenarios of how one should approach something, the better. And also have expectations for the senior leaders in understanding that we are dealing with a completely different mindset, a completely different generation, and the way that they operate and think. And so really it's both sides of the parties that need to come together. So to answer your question, a very robust onboarding and orientation with as much spelled out as possible, ongoing repetition as well, so that our brains will really stick and require with them. I am a firm believer in handwritten notes. So I see some companies saying no laptops in meetings, just take notes, and maybe they'll have an AI recorder or summary or something. But the more that you can handwrite notes, the more that the individuals across the board will retain information. And the number one thing that I see senior leaders doing that they don't mean to do, but like you said, they're super busy, they're underwater, they're stressed within themselves, they're thinking about soccer practice and what's for dinner. But the biggest thing I see these managers not doing is spending one-to-one time with the younger career professionals. That is almost like bottom of their priority list. Meanwhile, the early to mid-career, really anyone, quite frankly, they are mentally prepared for these one-on-ones. They are excited to have one-on-one, like uninterrupted time with them. And the worst thing that one can do is cancel it last minute, move it around, be inconsistent about it, because you're signaling to that individual that they aren't priority and that they don't really matter. So the more upfront time, the more guidance, the more resources, the more tools, maybe it's external coach or maybe it's ongoing trainings that you can pour into early career, they are craving that, and you'll get a high ROI from that as well.
Now, as far as the one-on-ones, are you, as a general rule, do you prefer more frequently and short, or once a month and longer? Do you have any guidance towards that?
Sure. What I've seen as best practice is ideally weekly for 30 minutes, if not bi-weekly for 45 to 60 minutes. Ideally weekly for 30 minutes, where really there's only 3 agenda items. What are you working on? How can I support you? Where are you stuck? What's your goal for next week? Very, very, very simple, but the one-to-one should be a very equal airtime and should be the opportunity for not only the manager to share their priorities that they need the individual contributor to achieve, but a great time for the individual contributor to receive some bite-sized coaching and guidance and advice from that individual as well.
Now you spoke a little bit about soft skills, and obviously you teach a course on it. What advice, what guidance are you giving your students as far as they're starting their career, you're trying to help them be the best, whatever they plan to be. What guidance are you giving them at the school level?
Do not bring your whole entire unfiltered self to work.
Okay.
One of the most ambiguous angles of our professional landscape is authenticity, using your quotes for our listeners. And I believe as a society, we've overcorrected on authenticity just a tinge. Gen Z in particular, they don't really understand where that line of professionalism and authenticity is. Authenticity is not an excuse to overshare, make work like a therapy session, or have work be an excuse, authenticity be an excuse for toxic behavior. Think about it. Gen Z in particular, and their younger millennials, when it comes to privacy, their default was exposure. They share so much on social media. Quite frankly, their parents probably shared a lot about them on social media early. So their default privacy mark is exposure. But I'm 41, so I call myself a geriatric millennial, an older millennial. My husband's Gen X, and for their baby boomers that are in the workforce, our default was privacy. We didn't bring our problems to work. We left them at the door. We didn't bring an oversharing, hyper requirement of emotional support to work. And so I think spelling out what does authenticity really mean? So instead of bringing your whole entire unfiltered, potentially just default way of being self to work, I teach bringing your signature self to work instead. So your signature self is someone that takes responsibility for the energy that you contribute to the environment. Your signature self is still real, but intentional. You're being intentional on how you're experienced. Your signature self does not mean suppressing, and it also doesn't mean being fake, rigid, phony, people pleaser. It just means that you're constantly being mindful because you're self-aware, or you continue to practice self-awareness. In my opinion, there's no end zone, or, you're never fully self-aware, in my opinion. There's no finish line. Self-regulation, you can stay composed during moments of pressure and stress, which I think is also a lifelong endeavor for many of us. And then self-coaching, how do you talk to yourself in your head? Your signature self is your reputation. There's a lot of talk around personal brand, professional brand, your brand. Absolutely. It's really, if we're going to break this down, it's your reputation. How are people experiencing working with you? Because a watch out is, well, this is just who I am, or I'm just being myself. Well, I'm a Libra. This is how I am. That's not an excuse for poor behavior. So I think spelling out, what does authenticity at work mean? It's okay to have some social fluency. Doesn't mean that you're fake or hardcore code switching. Having tiny adjustments based on the environment is a critical soft skill that then will help with the professionalism, will help with the critical thinking and the communication.
That's awesome. Actually, that reminds me, I think it was a book by Disney or something where they talk about when they hire people that they don't hire a cashier, they hire an actor playing the part of a cashier.
Yes.
So, at work, I always say that, well, I'm not really a CEO. I'm acting like I'm a CEO. So that's why I do certain things certain ways and stuff. But
Steve, I love that you brought that up. I have not talked about this book in a while. It's called Disney You. And the big takeaway is Cinderella is always on stage. Because when you are coming in as a Disney employee, you're representing Disney and you are your true signature self. And this was on the heels. I vividly remember, gosh, you're really bringing me back. I vividly remember one of the stories in the book was Snow White, and she was on her lunch break and she was smoking a cigarette and someone saw and someone was like appalled by it. And it's like, hey, when you're on the ground, you are an actor. You are on stage at all times. Then when you leave, it's similar to, we grew up saying, leave your problems out the door. Then when you leave. So yeah, I agree. It's the same thing, but unfortunately, the fabric of our work today with social media and exposure and public, a digital presence at all times can really make that confusing for someone that doesn't have the experience.
Yeah, it's a hard line. Even in our industry, I guess when millennials first came along, being in cybersecurity, often had to explain to people it's not that they don't want to be secure. It's just that when I got into IT was a room that had one big computer in it and it was locked and nobody could get in. Now people are growing up with computers on their desks at home, and there's just a casualness. They go to Best Buy, they can get whichever one they want. They're used to not having rules, not there being limits, and so it's hard to. That frame of reference is very different than the frame of reference that I have, which is, well, yeah, I shouldn't have access to that, or just go do stuff. It's it's a completely different world and mentality.
That's right.
Well, let's talk a little bit about blood pressure, and I think of blood pressure kind of like I thought the metrics of the industry. What performance metric do you think is telling the story for you right now?
Sure. There was a 2024 study, in fact, intelligent.com posted about this, where 60% of organizations have terminated at least one Gen Z employee within the first year, citing professionalism, communication, motivation, and workplace behavior. So this isn't necessarily a personality trait issue. It's teachable skills that employers have to prioritize that they didn't have to in the past. So it's definitely a shift. And again, that goes back to the National Association of Colleges and Employers stats, the survey that I synthesized around professionalism, communication, and critical thinking. And now you tack on AI, and for these individuals that are still, their brains are growing and they're still learning, it's for Gen Z on how they should show up, how they should stand out, how they should even utilize AI. What exactly is professionalism? What can I say? What can I not say? What's going to backfire? Am I going to be come off annoying or awkward? And so it's really right now explaining the how-to of the unwritten expectations. I call this the micro behaviors that are getting kind of lost in the sauce, and we need to go back to the basics to spell out.
So are there kind of the usual suspects of unwritten rules that you think young professionals are most likely to miss? Especially in smaller organizations, where there's, typically there's not as much formal onboarding in smaller organizations, but what are some of those unwritten rules maybe?
Sure. Appropriate workplace topics, inappropriate workplace topics, even appropriate social media posting regarding your work versus what's not appropriate, interruptions versus interactions, quite frankly, even first impressions and a handshake. For every single internship group, college student, high school student that I talk to, I have them do a handshake contest.
Okay.
And I teach them how to shake someone's hand where you're delivering a really positive first impression. As a quick sidebar, there's a 2024 study from Princeton that indicated first impressions are created within 0.1 seconds.
Wow.
And so I try to really drill into them that their first impressions are important. And then they have multiple first impressions going forward in second round interviews and recruiting or other meetings and such. So another unwritten rule that leads me to is their nonverbal communication, their body language. I cannot tell you how many times until I say this out loud, I have people on my virtual screen or in person where they're like this. For the audio listeners, I'm slouching. They're giving me, a negative facial expression. I flat out tell them, do not do the Gen Z stare. Do you know about the Gen Z stare?
I don't know the Gen Z stare. Educate
Do you know
me.
about the RBF?
Yes, I know RBF.
Okay. The Gen Z stare is basically the Gen Z's version of our millennial RBF. So the Gen Z stare, and you can go on ChatGPT, as I call Claudette or Google. It's when they just look at you with a really blank stare till it's their turn to talk. And then they have some sort of expression or, excitement or something. I tell them, you want to do the nonverbal communication dance. Don't interrupt people, but when they're saying something, nod, smile, write something down, show them that you're dancing, that you're vibing with them. So many young professionals don't realize how important their nonverbal, their facial expressions, and their body language speaks 1,000 words.
Gotcha. That's great. Now, you brought up virtual screens. Are there, obviously organizations that have people who are virtual workers, kind of the demands, the challenges, even the one-on-ones, there's some opportunities to things right or wrong. What advice would you give people that might be a little bit different when you've got remote workers?
Do your best to always come on camera when you're on any virtual meeting. I know that can be challenging. And listen, there's going to be some very casual, quick, last-minute meetings or touch bases where you can just go audio and keep it simple. But especially for interns in early career, always come on camera. You don't need to spend a lot of money on your outfit or wear crazy makeup or jewelry, but just look put together. A nice cardigan versus a hoodie. I do think that we're going back to more business casual, business professional workplaces. I had a babysitter the other day and she was in college and she had an interview. And I'm like, oh, where's the interview? She's like, oh, it's just virtual. I'm like, well, where are you taking the interview from? She's like, I don't know, like my desk or my bed, somewhere in my bedroom. And I'm like, what are you wearing? And she's like, I don't know, I was just going to put on a sweater or something. I was like, girl, make sure you have good lighting. Even today, I had a 30-person virtual internship program that I delivered. And there was about 5, I had them all on camera, it was beautiful. But there were about 5 of them, I could not see their face. The light was behind them and they were dark. So how can you really connect with someone? You're already going up against the 8 ball with being virtual when you can't see your face. So make sure you have a really polished look to your on-screen digital presence, number one. Number 2, attention spans are declining. It is so easy to multitask. And when you do multiple things at once, you're doing nothing at once. There are times that if I've met someone new or someone introduces me and I have an intro call with them, I see the lights from their other screen or the actual screen moving. I'm like, I could tell that you're multitasking, And so just recently I met someone and I said, we were talking, he was talking about an interview that he has coming up. And I'm like, oh, is the interview right after our call? Is that why you're multitasking? And he got called, he's like, I apologize. I didn't mean to come off rude. But it is so tempting to look off to the side. We could tell when you're texting and looking down and doing your best to be fully present. I always tell everyone being fully present is the biggest flex because then you can you're giving respect. And again, people are constantly subconsciously assessing what it's like working with you. So if you're multitasking, not paying attention, afterwards, what are they going to clock in their heads? Anna's not really fully present. She doesn't seem like she cares. She doesn't seem like she's coachable. So those are some advice tips that I would give.
Now we're talking about a lot of, and thank you for those. We're talking about some of these soft skill challenges and stuff, but is it really a Gen Z issue or are there leadership issues here? Maybe just where, we assume people magically know how things work. Is it multi-generational?
It is multi-generational. Gen Z just has a particular makeup that I hope I focus in on. But a few examples, yesterday, a national insurance company that I work with, and I did a women's council, yearly women's leadership retreat talk. And now I'm coming back to deliver 2 master classes. And the biggest issue is all the managers, mid-career, senior, leaders, they don't know how to communicate and talk to people. It's a human nature issue. This is a tale as old as time. They either, they're great individual contributors, great news. The most logical next step is you get promoted into a manager. Now you have to manage humans. And P.S., I was saying this line, the humans line, for years. And I remember someone on Facebook commenting was like, you shouldn't call people humans. I'm like, we're humans. We make mistakes. We have moods. We, are, snappy. We're humans. So anyway, and no one spells out, hey, now that you're a manager, now that you're a leader, here's some ways that you interact with people. Here's social fluency that you have to have. You want to meet people halfway. It's not just about you. When I first started my coaching practice, I got my certification from NYU's School of Professional Studies. And I was introduced to an executive coach. And this guy was an executive coach for 20 years before it was even popular and a thing.
Okay.
This was back in 2022. And I asked them, you've been coaching C-suites, VPs, executives. What's the common theme that you get in your coaching? And he tells me, Anna, people just cannot get along. Grown men with grown children, grown women, they cannot get along. So yes, soft skills is something AI can never replace. And that AI really won't be able to fully solve just on technology alone. It's an, lifelong human nature forever issue.
Yeah. So for the executive, for the, let's say crafty veteran, who's been around for a while, who's trying to coach a younger generation, how do they coach that social fluency without it sounding like, well, back in my day, we moved uphill both ways to get to staff meetings. How do they not come off that way?
So one of the tactics, which I strategies, tactics seems like there's a manipulative negative connotation to it. One of the strategies in truly coaching someone is having the insights come from them versus, a lot of people call themselves a coach. That's why I wanted to get formally trained. It took me 10 months. Consultants, advisors, mentors, when you tell someone what to do, if any of the listeners that has kids, you tell your kids something to do, maybe they'll listen to it if you're lucky. But if the insight, the decision comes from them, they have ownership of it, and they're more likely to execute on that. So that's where the time, empathy, and patience comes in. Asking the younger employee that the senior leader is seeking to coach per the scenario that you just asked, asking them, what are you struggling with? How do you want to be seen? What do you want your reputation to be? One of the things that I do in my workshops is creating this signature self-statement. What are words that you want people to say about you behind your back? Is it agile? Is it executor, patient, fun, professional? All right, now let's create behaviors that will exude that. And then workshop with them do's and don'ts. This way they're more bought in and they're more likely to, work on those behaviors and put those behaviors into action versus just telling them what they should do.
Now, how does that play out for things like checklists and SOPs and obviously you've got something that's written out and very structured and very detailed. You've got an audience who wants to multitask and do other things, who doesn't want to follow a checklist. How do you help them appreciate the importance of having a checklist, creating a checklist, following a checklist?
We always forget the context and why. Most times we're busy. And even again, today with the 30 interns, they were telling me they get directions that aren't really clear, they're ambiguous, and they don't even understand why they're doing something. So it goes back to, here's a checklist. Here's why we have the checklist. Here's when we started the checklist. Here's the last time that we updated the checklist. And by the way, as you go through the checklist, if you have any ideas or changes to it, I would love to learn because as a sidebar, Gen Z hates antiquated processes. Here's what happens when you miss one of the steps on the checklist. Here's the trickle effect of what can happen. Again, that requires time, empathy, and patience, which sounds annoying for me to say and easier said than done, but we always forget the context. And when you explain and connect the dots to them on the upfront why and then the lagging reason, impact of what can happen if something gets missed, it's easier for them to have a higher chance of them executing on it fully versus just giving them something to do and they have no emotional connection to the overall big picture of the process. Got
it. Great. I like it. Well, let's go ahead. Let's just keep scrolling along, and let's talk about weight. Now, when I think about weight, I think of kind of the strategy of things. Is there a strategy metric that you feel is kind of affecting that whole employee experience side of things?
Strategy metric. Well, first of all, that's a great question. The future of our work is going to change dramatically in terms of the nature of the job. The World Economic Forum put out a massive study that said by 2030, also there's a lot of studies that everyone's talking about by 2030, 92 million jobs are expected to disappear because of AI, but 170 million new roles are expected to come about because of AI. NVIDIA CEO last summer, July 7th or 8th, spoke back to Anthropic CEO, who last Memorial Day weekend said that there's going to be a white collar bloodbath. Also by 2030, 50% of entry level jobs are going to be taken over by AI. And the NVIDIA CEO was like, you know what, that dude's right. But there's going to be so many new jobs and new titles that we can't even think of yet because of AI. So I think curiosity and challenging the status quo and always being curious and trying to be innovative to, is this really the best process? Is this really the best checklist? What human angle can I add to this? And how can AI make this even more efficient or more innovative? So just completely questioning how you're doing something, why you're doing something, the way you're going about it. Is there a better way to do something? What I call the ABCs of always be curious. So I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, I just that labor report sounds a little like somebody shook an etch-a-sketch on the whole org chart.
Correct. That's a really great way to think of
I was
it.
sitting in the corner just going, so do I still approve PTO? What's up?
Those, for your listeners, I don't mind, I'm going to share an analogy. I grew up pretty close-minded against American football. I did not like American football. I am Brazilian. I grew up loving soccer and the World Cup. And so when I met my all-American husband from Philadelphia, who is a huge diehard Eagles fan, I really was resistant to American football for literally 7 years. It was around the Michael Vick era. I forgave him for what he did for the Dogs. And it was right in the Michael Vick era that I really got into because he was so agile and unique. And it's to the point now, Steve, that I get a babysitter for my kids so that we can watch the games in peace, especially the playoff games. So one of the reasons I didn't like American football is I thought it was so aggressive. And I never really understood why human beings would want to physically run into other humans. I didn't understand the game. And so it was 2 years ago, the year that we, thank heavens, won the Super Bowl. It was one of the playoff games, had a sitter, sitting down with my husband, and I'm watching Saquon Barkley do his thing. And I'm watching him run through humans, the exact opposite of what I didn't like about football, and that I was resistant to being open-minded about it. And my husband very casually says, well, he has good vision. So everything to me is a leadership story. I watch 30 for 30s and documentaries and everything's a leadership. So I had to Google, what does it mean to have good vision as a running back? And I'm learning it's about running to daylight. And I'm sure many of your listeners and viewers and community can explain it better than I'm about to. Having good vision as a running back is, even though you have the set play, you're always on your heels, on your toes, looking for the opening to proceed when things don't go as planned. You're not going to let humans and challenges block you. You're going to stay so focused to that opening to run to daylight, to get to that first down or to get to the end zone. And so immediately my brain went to, well, this is just like work and workplace dynamics. You have the SOP, you have the checklist, but running to daylight and having good vision is thinking, what's a better way that I can go about this? How can I get this barrier? I'm not going to let so-and-so who's mean to me or doesn't know how to talk to me get in my way. I'm not going to let this IT challenge, no pun intended, be a barrier. How can I be innovative? How can I be curious and always looking for the path forward? And I think that is the mentality that I wish to impose on so many individuals to help fuel them how to be successful and navigate the next few years and frankly the next era of our world. Is how can you be innovative, be curious, be constantly second guessing and thinking of better ways to execute.
Now, in your head, do you feel the emergence of AI going to add anything to that or make anything different that people need to be mindful of?
Sure. I mean, there's some people, listen, I fully understand and know that AI has its negative connotations. Absolutely. There's concerns with the environment, there's concerns with cognitive dissonance, there is AI slop, there's average intelligence. We are all still figuring this out. Matter of fact, I sometimes team up and pair up with John Ratliff from Align 5 and Kristen Kopp, who work within the scaling up ecosystem.
Yeah.
And we did 11 annual strategy sessions this past December and January with 11 different organizations from all different ranges in terms of size and revenue. All of us, including them, are trying to figure out AI, how to utilize AI, how to not overdo it, how to not replace the human skill sets, how not to share private information. So I think we're all trying to figure it out. So in terms of AI, doing your best to utilize it effectively, efficiently, but I always say brain first, AI second, brain last. AI gives you the output, but you own the product.
Nice. Now you mentioned having a run to daylight vision. Monday morning, I come into work. What's your advice to me to have that kind of a vision in seeing things?
Well, speaking of vision in particular, for those of us that are able to see, I have a giraffe back here because I always talk about having giraffe vision. Giraffes are the tallest animals. They are constantly seeing big pictures zoomed out. In corporate talk, we're like, let's take a 10,000 foot view of this. That's their default point of view. I call it perspective altitude. They are anticipatory. They can anticipate problems before they arise, and they have peripheral vision. So they can see all sides of a story. They can see left, in front of them, and to the right. They're agile. They can get down to the nitty gritty if they need to. So Monday morning, you have the Sunday scaries, the Monday blues. Lift up. Giraffe vision. What matters most? What should I be focusing on? Signal versus noise. And then how can I run to daylight on the day-to-day throughout the way? Always doing your best to lift up from being in the weeds and thinking big picture, holistic. What matters most outside of yourself? And then have your strategic plan for each day. Top 2 to 3 things that you have to do every single day, and top 2 to 3 things that you need to complete for that week.
Oh, that's nice. I like that. Of course, I'm used to, I'm in Texas, so most businesses have prairie dogs. Something pops up, everybody panics, and then everybody goes back into their holes until the next crisis. So that's a little different.
I love it. That's fun.
Well, as we kind of get to the end and wrap this up, we kind of hit a lot of stuff today, but I guess I wanted to ask you. I guess in technology we talk a lot about systems, upgrades, future readiness, but today I kind of feel like you've reminded us that people need upgrades too. So as leaders prepare teams for AI, the future of work. So one human skill or mindset you think they shouldn't overlook, or can't afford to overlook?
No matter your title, no matter how much money you make, no matter your age, always think big picture, think all sides of the story before you proceed. Be hyper aware, interrupt the default. So if your default story is kids these days, they're lazy, they don't know this. If your default is, I'm 23, I don't know what I'm doing, I don't want to, interrupt that default and big picture. What's a different way for me to see this and proceed? Because we're going to need tremendous curiosity, innovation, and just intentionality and, frankly, human thoughtfulness to get us through the next few years.
Nice. That's a great. Now, if you're in the doctor's visits, not just the visit, sometimes I'll let you go home with a prescription. So if this were a leadership culture or leadership clinic, and our listeners were walking out with a treatment plan, what other prescriptions would you give them to help, be more intentional with their people?
So I am a big fan of behavioral assessments. Enneagrams is super popular. DISC is tried and true. Predictive index. Anything that you can do to enhance self-awareness, social, situational awareness, anything that you can do to deploy these behavioral assessments to your team. I know Kristen Kopp is great with working genius, unreasonable hospitality. Anything that you can do to enhance the awareness so that you know who you're interacting with, you know their triggers, you know your triggers, and it can help with your delivery of your message landing better with others.
Awesome. Now, if anyone in the audience wanted to reach out to you, what would be the best way to facilitate that?
AnaWelsh.com, AnaWelsh.com. Please find me on LinkedIn. I'm about to launch my brand new speaker reel and share a lot more about the types of programs and continuity programs that I have to help make changes in the micro behaviors within workplace dynamics so that people could be happier. When they're happier, our customers are happier, and customers are happier, those profit margins are big.
Happy. Definitely makes a difference. Well, thanks for that. And we'll make sure and get that into our show notes so that our audience can have all that information, including your LinkedIn profile. And as for myself, you can always reach me at the doctor, all spelled out, THEDOCTOR at fulcrumgroup.net or via LinkedIn. And hey, that brings us to the end of our doctor's appointment. How do you feel today, Anna?
Much better. Energized.
I like it. As I reflect on our appointment, I realized Anna's big takeaway, in a world where AI can do more than, more of the task work, the people around us will become more indispensable. I think in some ways, the ones others trust, value, and generally enjoy working with. But you've got to have those soft skills to kind of reinforce that, whether you're the leader or the team member. Just having those people skills to survive and thrive are going to go a long way. Well, thanks. If today's conversation got you thinking, be sure to subscribe to Talk to the Doc. Share it with a friend, share it with a business leader, read it to your dog. I don't care. Somebody needs it. Everybody needs it. Send us your ideas for future guests and topics. I'm your host, Steve, the Dr. Meek, and the doctor is out. See you next time. Thanks so much. Appreciate it, Anna.
Thank you.